Everyone told them to fight. Their neighbors fought. The whole world fought. 2 world wars, millions of soldiers. Entire cities turned to dust and smoke. Switzerland watched, and while everyone else was burning, Switzerland was building. While everyone else was losing, Switzerland was winning. Today, it is one of the richest countries on earth. Its banks hold the secrets of kings and presidents. The world's most important meetings happen on its quiet streets. Nobody attacked Switzerland. Nobody invaded it. Nobody even tried. A small country. No ocean. No oil. No empire. Just silence. So what did Switzerland know that the rest of the world did not? Before Switzerland was peaceful, it was feared. For hundreds of years, Swiss soldiers were some of the best fighters in all of Europe. Kings hired them. Princes paid for them. If you wanted to win a war in the 1400s, you wanted Swiss men on your side. They came from the mountains. They were strong. They were disciplined. They moved in tight groups with long spears. Enemy armies broke apart when they saw them coming. Other countries had bigger armies, but Swiss soldiers were faster, more organized, more dangerous. Switzerland was a small place, but its soldiers made it feel very large, and for a long time that worked. Switzerland started to grow. It won battles. It took new land in the valleys and plains below its mountains. It pushed south toward Italy. It pushed west toward France. Swiss leaders felt confident. They believed their soldiers could beat anyone. Then came the year 1515. Switzerland chose to fight France. France was one of the largest and most powerful kingdoms in Europe. But Switzerland had won so many times before. Its leaders were not worried. The two armies met near a small town in northern Italy called Marignano. The battle lasted 2 full days. On the first morning, the Swiss attacked with full force. They pushed forward with their long spears the way they always did. The sky above the battlefield was pale and cold. The ground shook with the sound of thousands of boots. But France had something new, something Switzerland had not prepared for. Cannons. Rows of them. Big and heavy and loud. Swiss soldiers had faced swords and horses before. They knew how to fight those. But cannons were different. The damage was fast. The noise was like thunder that did not stop. The Swiss kept fighting. They were not cowards. But courage alone could not stop iron and fire. By the end of the second day, it was finished. Switzerland lost. Very badly. Thousands of soldiers did not come home. The land Switzerland had taken. Gone. The dream of becoming a great European power. Over. A young soldier who survived walked back alone through the mountain passes. His coat was torn. His hands were shaking. He had gone to war for a bigger Switzerland. He came home to a broken one. That defeat was felt in every village and every family. Switzerland looked at what had happened. Its best men had fought with everything they had, and still, they had lost everything. The world was changing. Bigger countries. Bigger weapons. Bigger armies. Switzerland was small and surrounded. France to the west. Austria to the east. Powerful Italian states to the south. It could not win against all of them. It could not even try. So a quiet thought began to form. Not a plan yet. Just a feeling. What if we stopped fighting their wars? What if we simply stayed still? It was not a proud idea. It was born from pain, not from wisdom. From loss, not from strength. But sometimes the most powerful decisions come from the most difficult moments. If you enjoy stories like this one, please subscribe to Calm English Journeys. It helps us make more stories for you. And now, let us continue. The decision did not happen overnight. After Marignano, Switzerland did not stand up and announce to the world, "We are neutral now." It was quieter than that, slower, more like a river changing its course. Not all at once, but over many years, in one direction. First, Switzerland stopped sending its own armies into foreign wars. Swiss soldiers still worked as personal guards for European kings. The famous Swiss Guard still protects the Pope in Rome today. But Switzerland as a country began stepping back from the battlefield. It was a small change, but it was noticed. When other countries went to war, they watched Switzerland, and Switzerland did nothing. No armies moved, no borders changed, no flags fell. Slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Other countries started to trust Switzerland, not because Switzerland was powerful, but because Switzerland was predictable. Everyone knew what Switzerland would do. Stay still. Stay quiet. In a world full of broken promises and changing loyalties, that kind of reliability was worth a great deal. The real turning point came in 1815. After the long wars of Napoleon, wars that had torn Europe apart for 20 years, the great powers sat down together in a meeting called the Congress of Vienna. They redrew the map of Europe. They decided who owned what. And they made an official decision about Switzerland. They recognized Swiss neutrality in writing. Formally, permanently, Switzerland would not fight. And in return, no one would attack Switzerland. It was the first time in history that a country's choice to stay out of war was protected by an international agreement. Switzerland now had something rare, a guarantee. A merchant in Geneva heard the news and felt the change immediately. For years, he had worried about which army might cross his city next, which king might decide Geneva was worth taking. Now, for the first time, he could think about something else. He could think about business. And that is exactly what happened. With peace guaranteed, Switzerland became a safe place to store things: money, gold, secrets. Wealthy families across Europe had a serious problem. Wars kept destroying their savings. Armies seized gold, banks collapsed when kingdoms fell. They needed somewhere stable, somewhere protected, somewhere that would not suddenly switch sides. Switzerland was all of those things. So the money came, quietly and carefully, carried through mountain passes and across still lake borders. The air in Geneva's banking room smelled of wood and paper and old stone, the kind of quiet that made people feel nothing would move here, nothing would change. As the money arrived, Switzerland grew, not through conquest, not through battles won, but through trust. It was a completely different kind of power. Other countries built larger armies to protect their wealth. Switzerland built a reputation, and a reputation, it turned out, was far harder to destroy than any army. The small country that had lost everything on a battlefield 300 years earlier had found something more durable than victory. It had found a system, and that system was only just beginning. Neutrality sounds clean. It sounds safe. It sounds like the right thing to do. Stay out. Stay quiet. Let others fight their battles. But in the 1930s and 1940s, Switzerland's neutrality was tested in a way that still feels deeply uncomfortable today. Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany in 1933. Within a few years, Nazi Germany had moved across Europe like a shadow. France fell. Poland fell. The Netherlands fell. Austria fell. Switzerland was surrounded. To the north, Germany. To the south, Italy, ruled by Mussolini. To the west, occupied France. To the east, Austria, already gone. Switzerland was a small island of quiet inside a sea of war and fire, and Switzerland stayed neutral. But here's the part that is harder to talk about. Staying neutral does not mean doing nothing. It means choosing not to choose. And sometimes, not choosing is itself a choice. Switzerland kept trading with Nazi Germany throughout the war. It sold weapons. It sold machine parts. German military trains passed through Swiss tunnels. Swiss banks accepted German deposits and kept German accounts open and safe. Some of that money was not really German. After the war, investigators discovered something disturbing. Some of the gold sitting quietly inside Swiss bank vaults had been stolen. Not stolen from governments. Stolen from Jewish families who had been sent to concentration camps. Gold taken from homes. From jewelry boxes. From the bodies of people who did not survive. It sat in Swiss vaults. Clean. Organized. recorded in neat, careful files. A Jewish family arrived at the Swiss border in 1938. They had heard Switzerland was safe. They carried one small suitcase each. The children held their mother's hands. Her fingers were cold. She held their papers out at the border gate and waited. The guard turned them away. Switzerland had quietly asked Germany to mark Jewish passports with a large red letter J, so that Swiss border guards could identify Jewish refugees and refuse them entry more easily. That is not neutrality, that is participation, with a different name, and after the war, there was more. Billions of dollars remained in Swiss banks, accounts belonging to Jewish families who had died in the Holocaust. Their children searched, their grandchildren searched, they wrote letters, they asked questions. They traveled to Geneva and Zurich with names and dates. Swiss banks said they could not find the accounts, could not confirm the names, could not return the money. It took until 1998, more than 50 years after the war ended, for Swiss banks to finally agree to pay $1,250 million in settlement to Holocaust survivors and their families. The mountain air outside was clean and cold. The marble floors of the bank buildings were polished smooth. The ledgers were perfectly kept. But some numbers take generations to face. Switzerland's silence kept it physically safe. That part is true. But silence during evil is never truly free. It always carries a price, and sometimes that price is paid by the people standing just outside your door, in the cold, with nowhere left to go. After all of that, the wars, the gold, the silence, the difficult questions, something surprising happened. The world kept coming to Switzerland anyway. Not despite its neutrality. Because of it, when countries could not speak to each other, they needed a place where both sides could sit in the same room, a place that belonged to no one, a place with no enemies, no history of taking sides, a place where a conversation could begin without either side feeling trapped. Switzerland was that place. In 1863, a Swiss man named Henry Dunant had an idea. He had witnessed a battle in northern Italy, thousands of wounded soldiers lying in an open field with no one to help them. He believed that even in war, some people should be protected. Doctors, nurses, the injured. He started an organization in Geneva. He called it the Red Cross. Today, the Red Cross works in almost every country on earth. Its symbol is recognized everywhere, and its home has always been Geneva, a quiet Swiss city beside a cold gray-green lake. Other organizations followed. The World Health Organization chose Geneva. The World Trade Organization chose Geneva. The United Nations placed one of its 2 largest offices there. Hundreds of international institutions set up their headquarters on Swiss soil. Diplomats from every country on earth walk the same wide streets. They negotiate in the same calm buildings. They sit across tables from people their own governments refuse to officially recognize, because in Geneva, the usual rules do not fully apply. A diplomat from a small country once explained it simply. In Geneva, he said, he could have a conversation that was impossible anywhere else. Because the city itself was neutral, the conversation could begin. Switzerland did not force anyone to agree. It simply gave them a room. That room turned out to be extremely valuable. The Swiss franc became one of the most stable currencies in the world. When financial markets collapsed in other countries, money moved to Switzerland. When wars made investors afraid, Swiss banks stayed open and calm. When political crises swept through Europe, Switzerland held steady. Today, Switzerland manages roughly 10% of all privately held wealth in the entire world. Not because it discovered oil, not because it built an empire, not because it defeated anyone in battle, because it never chose sides. Every January, the small mountain town of Davos fills with some of the most powerful people on earth. Presidents, company leaders, scientists, economists, they all travel to a tiny Swiss ski town to talk about the world's future. Outside the conference halls, snow falls steadily and the streets stay perfectly quiet. They chose Switzerland because Switzerland, by definition, belongs to no one in particular, and therefore to everyone equally. Switzerland became something no military power had ever managed to become. Not a conqueror, not an empire, not the largest or the strongest, just the most trusted room in the world. And in that room, almost everyone was welcome. As long as they agreed to leave their battles outside the door, Switzerland never set out to become powerful. It set out to survive. That is an important difference. A country that wants to conquer thinks about winning. It builds armies. It draws new borders. It collects allies and creates enemies. Switzerland thought about something much smaller. How do we stay alive? How do we protect what we have? How do we make sure no one has a reason to come for us? Those are quieter questions, more careful questions, but they led somewhere unexpected. When you stop trying to win, you stop making enemies. When you stop making enemies, people begin to trust you. When people trust you, they bring you their most important things: their money, their secrets, their most dangerous conversations. And slowly, without ever raising a flag over someone else's land, Switzerland became indispensable. Indispensable means something the world needs in order to function, something you cannot simply remove or replace. Switzerland became that. It is a strange kind of strength, not the strength of a fist raised in the air, more like the strength of a foundation under a building, the kind you only notice when it is no longer there. But Switzerland's story is not perfectly clean. We should be honest about that. The same silence that kept Switzerland physically safe also kept it quiet during moments when silence was the wrong choice. The same neutrality that built its reputation also sheltered things that should not have been sheltered. The same banks that held the world's wealth also held stolen gold for too many years, without asking difficult questions. Power built on trust is real power. But trust, once damaged, takes a very long time to rebuild. Switzerland spent decades doing exactly that: returning money, opening closed records, sitting with uncomfortable history instead of burying it, and the world, slowly, carefully, continued to trust it. Perhaps because the world understood something quietly. No country is perfectly clean. Every nation carries a history with shadows inside it. What made Switzerland different was not purity. It was patience. It stayed still long enough and consistently enough for the world to begin building on top of it. Not every kind of power announces itself. Some kinds of power are simply the room where things get decided, the table where enemies sit down, the place that does not belong to any one side, and therefore belongs to all of them. Right now, somewhere in Geneva, two people from countries that officially refuse to speak to each other are sitting across the same quiet table. Outside the window, a clock and a shop front shows the exact time, not 1 second fast, not 1 second slow. It has been keeping perfect time for a very long time. Leave a comment below. Tell me, do you think Switzerland made the right choice? Was staying neutral wise, or did it come at too high a price? I read every comment. I would love to know what you think. And that is our story for today, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped you learn something new. Keep listening, keep growing, and I will see you again very soon in our next story. Take care, my friends. Goodbye.